So, how is Christmas looking for you? Is it everything you hoped it would be? Everything you expected? Christmas is loaded with expectations, isn't it? Christmas shopping, decorating, entertaining. Typically, we knock ourselves out trying to make it the perfect Christmas. And year after year, we end up with the same empty feeling, like Christmas wasn't as personally fulfilling as we had hoped. We picture everyone else seated at a beautiful, decorated Christmas dining table, cheerful music playing softly, and a twinkling Christmas tree standing in the background. This is the time of peace on earth, goodwill toward others. And when we compare our holiday gathering against this ideal, we come up lacking. Somehow we think the perfect Christmas is happening in someone else's house, not our own. There's probably no greater gulf between what is and what is supposed to be than the December holidays. Blame the media, blame the movies, blame whoever you want for hypersizing our expectations, but the truth is we and our families are imperfect, and no amount of holiday gift wrap will cover those imperfections. We forget that it's just a romanticized notion that everyone should be gathered around the fireplace chatting up a storm where nobody is drinking too much or texting their friends about how they wish they could be anyplace else on the planet but here. We ignore the fact that it's a fantasy-only version of the holidays in which the house is spotless, there is no foreclosure notice on the door, and you haven't for a nanosecond thought about how you could possibly re-gift the foot massager you just got. Our lives simply aren't Hallmark moments. Holiday stress grows along with our to-do lists. The real killer comes, however, when we try to measure our lives up against the fantasy of what we are told the holidays and holiday spirit should be. The version we see in all the commercials and TV shows. And here's a news flash. We all come up short. It's just that some of us admit to it more readily. But the very first Christmas wasn't exactly an ideal, warm, and fuzzy moment in history either, as this morning's gospel text reminds us. Joseph was dealing with the fact that his new bride, the love of his life with whom he had already exchanged vows, legal and binding vows, mind you, this lovely young thing was pregnant before he had even gotten a chance to throw the wedding celebration and move her into the house. Joseph's reaction when he hears that Mary is pregnant is to suspect her of adultery, one of the grounds for divorce in Jewish law. What's more, the law and the culture of the day would virtually say that Joseph had no alternative but to divorce Mary. The best thing he could think to do was to make it a very private and quiet sort of divorce. And it's in that dark spot in his life, that day he received the news that from Mary that she was pregnant, that Joseph began to become aware of something very important, something each of us needs to know. He would come to discover that even in our darkest moments, God is with us. But there's a catch. And the catch is we don't get to learn the lesson until we experience our darkest moments. He wasn't totally in tune to God's presence in the beginning, but he would eventually come to that point. In the beginning, he was more or less left to his own devices. He sized up the situation, he looked at all his options, and to his credit, he eliminated the option of making a public spectacle of Mary or having her put to death. As he saw it, the only thing he could do was divorce Mary. After all, that was the law, wasn't it? When tragedy hits our lives and we are forced to make difficult decisions, it's not unusual or even a bad thing to evaluate our choices and options. But if we aren't also willing to open ourselves to the voice of God, we are sure to shortchange ourselves. Fortunately, for Joseph, he decided to sleep on it before following through with his decision. It's only when he settled down to an evening of sleep that Joseph was finally still enough to hear the voice of God. And it was during his sleep that God spoke to him through an angel in a dream. And the angel basically said, "I know this is not what you expected, Joseph, but it's going to be okay. God is about to do something wonderful." Joseph was warming up to the idea that God was with him even in his darkest moment. And that's the same lesson for each of us too. Amid all our less than picture perfect Christmases and the Christmas trees that are not quite as ideal as we would like them to be, and the lives that are not as faultless as we want them to be, God does something new. God is with us even when it doesn't feel like it. God is with us even when our world is crumbling around us. God is with us and is using our circumstances to do something new and amazing, even though we can't imagine anything good can come from it. God repeats the message to us that was spoken to Joseph. "I know this is not what you expected, but it's going to be okay. I am with you, and I'm about to do something wonderful." God's creative spirit is always doing new and wonderful things in our world. God is ever about the business of raising the poor up from the dust and lifting the needy from the ash heap. But it never happens with the wave of a divine magic wand. God partners with you and me to make it happen. And that means that there's always got to be just enough faith to go through the motions, even when it makes no sense to you. Our gospel text closes with the words that Joseph named the newborn baby Jesus. And that's more significant than you might imagine. According to Matthew's genealogy, Joseph could be the son of David only, Jesus could be the son of David only through Joseph. But Joseph was not his biological father. By naming the baby, Joseph acknowledged him as his son. In effect, Joseph adopted Jesus and thus incorporated him legally into David's genealogy. And there we have the small step of faith that was needed from Joseph. God is with us, and God is ready to transform our dark hours of despair into newness and wonder. But we have a role to play in that transformation. We have a responsibility. We are not passive observers in the creative miracles of God, but rather we are active participants. We have been called to be co-creators with God in healing the world, in establishing God's reign on earth as it is in heaven, and in bringing about peace on earth and goodwill toward all people. And the good news is we don't have to do it alone. God is with us. God is with us today just as much as God was with Joseph in our gospel text. God is with us even when things aren't looking so good and we have our doubts, as surely Joseph did. God's divine presence is felt in our quiet conversations with God, as it was in Joseph's dream. And God's presence is manifested. It takes on shape and form, even as we move out in faith and embrace our role as co-creators with God. God is with us. And if we are open to God's activity in our lives, then God is in us and is working through us. As the distance between today and Christmas grows shorter and shorter, I want to encourage you to put aside the fantasies of how you think Christmas ought to be and instead embrace the reality of what it is. It's certainly a time in which we remember and celebrate God's love, which took on human form in the person of Jesus of Nazareth. But it's also a time in which we recognize and acknowledge the many participants in that first Christmas. Joseph, Mary, the innkeeper, the shepherds, the Magi, all co-creators with God in the manifestation of love. But it wasn't a once-in-history event. God's love continues to manifest itself over and over as each of us is open to it in what would seem to be our darkest moments. This Christmas event, which we anticipate, the light of the world shining in the darkness, happens on a daily basis as much as we allow it to happen. And it happens with the promise that God is with us and always will be. Amen.